one has expired. We have to the final round of briefing of 2016 Council preliminary. So the motion for this round is this House is one head speech. Without anything further to that, I'd like to call the Prime Minister to open the
This is a hate speech motion, okay? So we're going to make our stance extremely simple. The stance coming from opening governments today is that when the government should take the safest option in actually protecting individuals who will lose their identity and their dignity, which can actually never be recovered. We're going to go into extensive detail on that point. And also, when an individual's actions actually causes irreversible harm to like the entire society and communities and also vulnerable groups in that society, we think that the government should actually take a harder stance and ban the sort of hate speech existing like in societies. So first thing I'm going to talk about is what is this motion? What is hate speech? And also like what is hate speech? And then secondly, I'm going to give an analysis about why freedom of speech is not an absolute right. And then finally, I'm going to talk about social disintegration in the societies today. So first, what is hate speech? We think hate speech is any discriminatory expressions whose goal is to specifically target the certain attributes of groups. For example, their skin color. For example, their religion. For example, those sort of things. These are like religion in some aspects. However, these are things that individuals themselves cannot change, and they are specifically targeted for these groups. And when these individuals are targeted, they feel like they lose their entire sense of identity. And we're going to actually talk about this later. So what kind of hate speech do we want to ban? The hate speech that involves speech, manga, videos, acts, writing. For example, manga, where they're depicting the sort of like Arabs who are actually like actively like Prophet Muhammad, who is actually in like a very like horrendous way, like denigrating those sort of symbols like in that religion or like in those areas. We think that is considered hate speech. For example, videos that are extremely racist towards indigenous groups in your society or also like vulnerable groups in your society. For example, actions such as burning of flags, burning of those sort of symbols, and also writings. For example, essays and any of those sort of things that are extensively attacking those things that people themselves cannot change. So first, why is freedom of speech not absolute, right? So as a government, like most governments and most liberal democracies in the world today already ban hate speech, already ban flag burning, already ban things like Holocaust denial that actually like hurt the dignity of individuals. So what does this mean? This means to some extent that governments in the world already recognize that when is this sort of action like targets a specific group and like gives them the sort of harm that is actually irreversible in like three ways, right? In terms of belonging, dignity, and psychological suffering, then the government should take a more active stance in protecting these individuals. So why is this true? For example, in America, like African American people who are being called like the N-word or being referred to as like slaves, being referred to as like objects. This actually denigrates those communities and makes those people feel like they can never change themselves, they can never improve themselves. This leads to things such as suicide in your society because those people feel like they're targeted in the public sphere every single day and they actually have no option. They have no option to change themselves and they resort to like an extreme radical method of escaping this sort of suffering which leads to their own suicide. However, even if this does not lead to suicide, we think there are other harms in three ways. First, people lose belonging to a certain group, right? Why is this important? Because we think that any individual in your society likes to be part of something larger than himself or herself. This gives us sort of security to a person, right? Why do we think this is going to be lost? Because, for example, if an African American group is being targeted by hate speech, we think that that group itself is going to put harsher regulations on its own members. Because if if some members in that society are being targeted by hate speech, and though they let those members back into their own community, then that actually spreads to the entire community. That entire community is also going to be targeted. We think that those people, those communities also want to avoid those sort of targets. We think that people can no longer actively say in public that they belong to certain groups. We think they lose a sense of security that they belong to something bigger or better than themselves. We think this is also a fundamental right to any group in your society. Also, we believe that this is a basic attack on personal dignity, which is also a human right? Because this is not something that individuals can change, right? If the individual is being attacked because of his or her color, his or her skin color, there's no way for him or her to escape this problem, right? We think that in this sort of society, if we allow harms to be done to people, of course, the state also recognizes that people have to have a certain option or to escape those harms, right? If these harms are actually escapable, if they cannot change their skin color and avoid this sort of suffering, of course, the government needs to take the safest option and prevent these sort of harms from happening in the first place. So dignity and irreversibility. And finally, psychological suffering. Because we feel that these individuals, the sheer amount of targets that they're going to become in the public sphere is also enough justification for the government to actually take a harder stance. Why is this true? Because we think that hate speech in itself is a very useful tool for radical parties to actually galvanize racism towards certain groups in your society. It's like a recruitment tool for them because it's a very emotional thing in which it can drag a lot of people into it and actually use as a tool to actually target individuals in society. So we think this sort of restructuring of the politics of your society that is continually going against certain groups in your society, this means that they're psychologically targeted 24/7. If they participate in politics, if they go out in the street, they are likely to be slandered against by other people. We think this sort of suffering is extremely bad. We need to prevent. Sorry, I'll take it after my next point. Actually, okay, you can go.
If that hate speech is based on no logic at all, at the moment, that kind of extremely stupid hate speech will be caused backlash. Why do you think the receiver of hate speech suddenly powerless and gets psychological damage?
So what he's saying is that if this hate speech existence, there would be backlash. So this already undermines this sort of problem, right? Because we think that hate speech in itself is very subjective, right? It's very hard to determine whether this thing is actually hate speech or not, right? Because we think that it's very difficult to draw the line whether or not you're literally calling someone worthless or racist, or whether or not you're just slightly denigrating their existence, right? So we think that parties themselves can still manipulate these sort of hate speech as tools to recruit people. But why is this bad for social integration? Because we think that racism in society is very emotional response. It means that if you radicalize political parties, it means that they can never agree on certain things. For example, welfare, affirmative action, society that involves different colors and people in your society. It means that legislation that's very important to protect vulnerable groups in your society is very difficult to be passed because of divisions in your society. For example, affirmative action to save poor individuals from those neighborhoods will never be able to be passed because hate speech radicalizes parties, radicalizes divisions, radicalizes those things in your society. What is the stance coming from us today? What is the core thing? First, because freedom of speech is not absolute, and also because there are irreversible harms that actually harm social integration and vulnerable groups, we think that we're very proud to take as government today.
Remarks on next to report on the lead of positions. Please communicate in 7 minutes. Here.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in our paradigm, the government said by the hate speech, there are a minority who are suffering from the hate speech. But in our paradigm, we think that the minority, even in the status quo, we can save the minority. So let me move on to my argument. So I have two arguments. Firstly, why we expect the freedom of expression even in hate speech. Secondly, I talk about how beneficial hate speech is. So before my argument, I will talk about I have some rebuttals to the government side. Government side as my introduction, the minority will feel suffering from the hate speech, but we don't think so because firstly, when the speaker make the hate speech, a lot of people can have the criticism for their speakers. So we think the minority can feel relieved. So minority, as a conclusion, we can save the minority. So in this about this point, I will talk about that later. So please tell me my point. Why I expect the freedom of expression? So in the status quo, we can. So in the status quo, the government allow the hate speech. We can by allowing the hate speech, we can disempower the hate speech. Why? Because the speaker has a place to express their opinion by hate speech. Firstly, in the status quo, the speaker can make the hate speech. So because they can make the hate speech, the people in public can watch or listen to their speech. By doing so, a lot of people can make the criticize them. So when they are when their speech or opinion are very bad, or when they have very strong bias, the people can criticize or protest against these speech. So secondly, as my rebuttals, minorities which got to the hate speech, the minorities which got the hate speech by the speaker can know that a lot of people supports themselves. So by doing so, what occurs? So it occurs that the minority has the confidence or be confident, and the minority can be strong by knowing the existence of their supporters, a lot of supporters, which is the majority. So they can by the existence of hate speech, they can make self-actualization, or they can be confident, or they can be strong. So secondly, what is the beneficial of hate speech? Benefit of hate speech. We think the hate speech can have the social discourse. So what is beneficial? So we think that by focused by a lot of people, a hate speaker can get the place to get refutation or rebuttals, criticism by a lot of people. Okay.
Okay, then why can you tell minority people have incentive to protect the minority?
We think there are a lot of people. There are a lot of people who criticize or who protest against their speech. So out of the majority can supports the minority who got the hate speech. So so return to my speech. So as I said, by forecast by a lot of people, a hate speaker can get the press to get reputation. But why is this significant? Simply, after taking this plan, they become undermine or underground actor because they don't have the place to express their opinion. Why it is so harmful? Because if they don't have the place to express their opinion freely, they have no choice but except making a crime or make the conversation in the dark place. So as a society, a lot of the antipathy or a lot of minor opinion will increase. So as a society, we have the possibilities to be involved in the crime. So as a conclusion, the banning hate speech is have the serious influence to the society. So we are proud to oppose this motion. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks. Next, I'd like to propose the Deputy Prime Minister to continue case the next minutes here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We strongly believe that hate speech is the source of many conflicts in society that cannot be changed, and it also hurts and damages and attacks innocent citizens who just want to live a normal life in peace, but they cannot do. They have to live in fear. They have to live with their dignity damaged. We strongly believe that these are crucial things and the government should intervene. So today, I have two arguments I want to talk about. The first one I want to talk about is that any efforts to make peace in society are like between communities, like white supremacists, or like whether it's blacks, or like Christian people, whether it's gays. All the efforts will be nullified just by the acts of some individuals. Second of all, I want to talk about that in the case where this clash was today, like individual versus freedom of speech. The dignity, identity, and the fear that the individual are, all these things versus like the freedom of speech. We believe that the individual should be prioritized in this case. So before I move on to my arguments, I would like to make two refutations. The first one is, so why hate speech does not contribute to better public discourse. They brought up this point, but we believe that the character of the hate speaker is that it's unchangeable, right? Because it's racist, etc. He attacks like innate attributes most of the times, and so they cannot compromise the fact. So we rather believe that the society is rather divided by these things because there is no flexibility, there is no change there. So second refutation is because they think if like we ban it, they go like underground and do like more radical things. No, thank you. And we believe first of all, if it's allowed, people will see it, of course, right? And of course, if it's allowed, people think it's alright because the government allows it. But if it's banned, all people who will see it in the first place will know it's something banned, it's something bad, and will have this way of thinking whilst listening to these or seeing these things, right? And second of all, just because you say there might be some other things happening at the background, that's just no justification to not ban it for the government. Even if there are some harms or black markets, it's not just another justification for the government not to intervene, not to make anything. So, moving on to my arguments. First argument, that any efforts to make peace will be nullified. And why is that? Because the status quo, there are also some people who actually want to make peace between these groups, right? For example, some Christians are pro-gay, want to allow them rights, right? But many people, some Christians, some radical Christians, make some hate speech, some of these individuals. And these cause great harms and great conflict between these two groups. And all the efforts of individuals, all the efforts of these communities will have no meaning just because one or some individuals or some little group of that part did some act like something. So and why is that? Because because it's about identity, right? And in the case of because hate speeches are often directed to some things that you cannot change, like being or not easily changed, for like being gay or like being black or being like a Mexican or whatever. And these things, if those people get attacked, actually, they just have to defend themselves, right? Because they know you can't change, you can't switch, and because of that, there are. So why then are the efforts undermined? Because first of all, the hate speech, if you get hate speech from those, you also believe that all of these are bad. You generalize that group. Why is that? Because if it's such a radical attack that is aggressive, right? And it has a lot of quantity, a lot of attacks, a lot of forms of videos or of writings or actions, right? And it's tenacious and never giving up. And it is directed to your whole identity, to yourself, something that you cannot change, something that defines you, right? Then you of course have this way of defending yourself. And in order to defend yourself, you will of course generalize. And every time when a white person or one person from KKK said something really bad or did something really bad to you in the form of hate speech, then every time you see another white person, you will of course feel the fear to defend you, because it was an attack to your very identity, to your very core part, right? So it seems that they generalize these things and then handle all the groups together, and also moreover, because there will be also backlash from these groups, if they attack to their very core part, the innate attributes. They of course do many people of those will do hate speech back because they want to protect themselves, right? And if they do so, of course there will just be more conflict that cannot be solved. It's a back and forth and hate will never solve the problem, right? And because it's just some individuals or some groups are doing these activities, all of the efforts to actually do something to make peace between those groups is nullified. And yes. So moving on to my second argument today. So in this case, if we have individual rights, that Pato told you about, the dignity of the person, which is the target of the hate speech, or the identity, because they are being attacked, the very core part of themselves, or the fear that is happening in them because they were like a KKK speech or a white supremacist speech in your neighborhood, and you don't know wherever you are safe. Where are you safe when you go to the supermarket? Are you safe when you go to that other place? Because these people are very radical and say we're gonna kill you all, right? And that is allowed. They say we're gonna kill you, we're gonna torture you, and these are the kinds of hate speeches that are done. Right, and then in that case, we believe the individual should be the defended individual should be prioritized. Why is that? Because, for example, in the case of defamation, right, even if we limit the freedom of expression, what is that? What is happening there? It's the right of one individual clashing with the rights of another, right? Freedom of speech. Where is the right? No, thank you. No.
As for the participants of hate speech, even though they're in status quo a lot of ways, such as participating in noble public discussion or political lobbying, why do you think that participants of hate speech are need to go on hate speech? Sorry,
no, it's all right. Okay. Yes. Also, if rights clashes with rights, we should prioritize, of course, the weaker one as the government, right? The victim, right? Who cannot make a difference, cannot defend themselves in this case, and are in fear, and is attacked their very identity and dignity. In this case, we believe, as in the same case as defamation, the freedom of light can be limited, and we should prioritize the individuals. And so overall, what we tell you, we told you that the individual right to defend themselves, to maintain the dignity, and to live in peace and not in fear, and also the efforts of people to actually, and also that we should respect the efforts of people who want to actually make peace, and that can solve this problem that we have in society right now. Whereas these things will nullify all the movements very easily, with just some individuals doing some movements or some hate speeches. And for all these reasons, we are very proud to propose today. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks. Next, I'd like to call on the leader of petitions. Please continue his presentation. Here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we believe, precisely because the hate speech is in the public, we think we can empower the effect of the hate speech, and we can enhance the dignity of the minority. And we think the hate speech cannot be, or we think it is arbitrary. Governments decide what is a hate speech and what is not hate speech is completely problematic in the first, because we think the hate speech what expression is good. It should be dependent on the individual inside the country. Government didn't know what is a hate speech to begin with. So I will enhance this point, and I want to talk about how counterproductive to do so. Counterproductive to take motion to enhance the dignity. So that's why we are proud to oppose. I want to talk about 3 issues. Firstly, why the hate speech should be in the public in terms of the government role. And secondly, I will talk about how counterproductive to decrease the tension between some minority and radical people after by taking this policy. And thirdly, I will talk about the comparison about the debate about the victim, the people, the harm for the minority. But before that, two independent rebuttals. Firstly, about the opposition side, government side, I told you about because of the hate under the status existence of the hate speech, then some radical group utilize it in order to gather the radical political party or so forth. But we think this is not. This is rather counterproductive to take in this plan, because we think as a part of Jojo, after passing policy, this kind of idea will be accumulated in the underground, and also such kind of group or the organization will be much more incentive to focus on such kind of accumulated too much radical idea inside, which is accumulated inside of the country. We think it is rather counterproductive. And secondly, they say the people who make the hate speech can't compromise or so forth, but this is not true. Because if they don't compromise and they continuously saying the radical idea which is not based on the evidence, of course they will not be gather the intention from the society. So that's the reason why, of course, their claim will not be taken attention from the society. That's the reason they will have the incentive to compromise to some extent. Secondly, and even if it is not compromised, it is okay, because the society can recognize their idea is failed, and because it is criticized for the society, and we can rectify the misunderstanding about the idea. So that's the reason why their argument is not important. So let me move on to my first issue, so why the hate speech should be in public. We think the content of the hate speech cannot be judged by
cannot be judged by the government in the first place. Why is that? Because the people, how they feel or how they actually recognize the hate speech itself is dependent on to person, right? Well, for example, the one word, the ridiculous word itself, is not so radical to some to the individual in the first place. But the important point is when or how such kind of words are actually used inside of the country, right, Mr. Speaker? So that's the reason why. So why it is completely arbitrary decision before some hate speech or was which is deemed to hate, which seems to hate speech, but which has potential to make a social discourse or clarify the misunderstanding inside the country. Why it is completely unjustifiable to stop. No, thank you. To stop to disclose inside of the country in the first place. So let me move on to my second issue about how counterproductive. So as I told you, under the status quo, we think there's two types of the speech inside of this country. Firstly is about the too much radical hate speech, which is not based on evidence, just emotional speech. And also the second one is not so radical, but there are some points of failure, or they have the room to rectify the misunderstanding within. So within the existing of both type of speech is extremely important. Why is that? Firstly, no, thank you. About the first too much radical one, of course, society recognizes that such radical argument is not true, because even in Europe, there are some companies in the country, Germany, already banning the hate speech or so forth. In that context, of course, the society or citizens have attention and have incentive to think about the hate speech itself is not good in the first place. So that in such a situation, of course, the people who are living in the minority will get supported by the criticism towards such kind of people, and they feel their majority of the idea is not denying our identity in the first place, and such specific people are just denying their idea. That is very important. And secondly, in the case of the not so radical one, okay.
Okay, even if those kind of discussion is going to occur, don't you think the minority have to hear those kind of offensive remarks, and which is so stigmatization for those people?
So even if they to some extent, some people will get the harm. We think it once it makes the social discourse. We think in the long term we can activate the discussion between the minority. We think it is good. And secondly, about second type points of types of the speech is about such speech can make the social discourse. What do I mean by that? Collect the failure of the statement. For example, some speech deny the ISIS itself, and if it's denied, it's also deny the Muslim because of the existing of ISIS. It is completely false. But we can, because such kind of speech are existing, people can criticize it and clarify the failure of the speech itself. ISIS is evil, but Muslim is not evil, right, Mr. Speaker? That is important. But after passing policy, what will happen is that all kinds of hate speech never go out to the public, and all the radical ideas are accumulated under the ground. And such kind of people, as I told you, they make that racism party or assault the minority on the basis of the idea which is accumulated under the ground, right, Mr. Speaker? But so let me start. So finally, let's compare. So we think such kind of insulting will happen, but we think the discussion or criticism will happen. That actually it can be disempower inside of the country, and people, the minority can feel they are protected by the majority. That's the reason why we are very proud to host.
Thank you very much. Then I will go on to the government. Please deliver your attention within 7 minutes. Here.
the contention coming from opening government is the dignity of minority is important. But as long as this debate is banning debate, we have to prove that after taking votes what will happen in the first debate. We believe that we can save those people from the suffering or stigmatization. We believe that there is something opening government doesn't explain this debate and which is necessary for government to win this debate. I'm going to talk about three things in my speech. First of all, how those kind of minorities get the stigmatization and how after taking votes we can save those people. And second of all, I'll talk about freedom of expression can be compromised as long as there is massive damage to those people. Lastly, I'm going to talk about discussion. That is something they stick to in this way. But before moving on, let me tell you one thing. What is the hate speech? Because the opening opposition say it is arbitrary for government to decide the definition of those kind of hate speech. We believe it is a clear definition because as long as it is a discriminative remark without reason or without evidence, we define this kind of remark as hate speech. For example, Korean people should die in Japan, or black people don't have human rights in America, or so on. So forth. We believe this is a clear definition in the first place. There is no doubtful point in the first place. That's why the opening opposition case doesn't stand in this way at all. So firstly, how stigmatization is happening in the first. We believe that in the vast majority of cases, the target of hate speech is a minority because they are the ones who get the discrimination, historical context, and also there are people who still have the racist idea. So that's why I think the minority is the most target of those kind of hate speech. We believe that when it comes to minority, they don't have enough power to rebut hate speech. They don't have enough power to get the counter discourse in the first place. Also, second of all, we believe that there is no actor who defends those kind of minority. Because the opening opposition says that criticism will happen. No, we believe majority don't have enough incentive to protect those people. Why is that? Because they don't have enough interest in those kind of minority problem in the first place. They prioritize their own life, daily life or so forth. That's why we think those people are vulnerable in the first place. And also, we believe that hate speech accelerate the discrimination to minority. Two analyses coming from my speech. First of all, those who already have the racism idea find it as a good opportunity to say racism remark. And also, second of all, for those who don't have the discriminative idea, we believe that hate speech can be the outlet for those people. We believe that those people are driven by hate speech. For example, if someone says like an immigrant is a shit, and a lot of people feel sympathy, or a lot of people also come to think my job is developed by immigrants. So, and also those speakers have massive incentive to spread this idea. For example, when you look at the situation of Trump said your American job is developed by Mexican immigrants. So we have to, we have the Mexicans don't have enough right of human rights or so forth. And a lot of people are swayed by those kind of remarks. They start to support him. They start to discriminate the Mexican people. We believe this is so damaging. Why the impact? Two analyses. First of all, they feel stigmatized from society. They lose identity. They lose dignity or so forth. And they may get a physical attack from other people, or they may be killed by those people. We believe this is so damaging. So how we can change this situation after taking proposal? We will firstly, we will hate speech in itself will disappear. That if you say something something offensive or hate speech, you will be punished. So we will minorities do not have to get those kind of stigma, and also people do not have to be radicalized from those ideas. That's why in the short term we can protect the minority in the first place. Also, second of all, we think that in the long run, also we can protect those kind of minority. For example, the school or in the society, there will be atmosphere that we should cooperate with each other between majority and minority, and we can educate those kind of things in school. And also, the children are innocent, so they regard those kind of minority as a true friend. That's why in the long run we can those kind of discriminative idea will disappear. And also, thirdly, we to some extent consider there are still people who have the discriminative idea after taking proposal. But we believe that anyway, there is no way to show their opinion with other hate speech after taking proposal. That's why we think that anyway we can protect the minority. And also, second of all, we think that in the long run, the racism idea in itself will disappear. Why is that? Because the reason why industrial school those kind of idea is spreading, they can hear those kind of remarks, they can listen to those kind of remarks, so they are moved by those kind of remarks. That's why if there is no remark about those kind of hate speech, the idea is that cannot be spread to society. That's why we think that in the long run we can protect the minority. That's why our case must stand. Second justification. We believe that in order to protect the vulnerable actor, we have to compromise those kind of freedom of expression. And also we think that if those kind of minority get discrimination in the historical context, we also have to protect those people. For example, Germany doesn't allow books of Hitler such as Mein Kampf or Hakenkreuz or so on. So forth, because in the historically, Jewish people are oppressed in Germany, and also to protect the Jewish people, we have to compromise those kind of freedom of expression. The same applies here in this way, because the target of those kind of hate speech, black people are LGBT, those people are historically oppressed by society. That's why we think that we have to protect those people rather than the freedom of expression. That's why we have to compromise freedom of expression. That's why their case doesn't stand in this way. Lastly, discussion. So basically, some discussion we're going to happen after taking proposal. First of all, we believe that why those majority have incentive to protect those people. I already asked in the point of information, no answer coming from their side. So how? And also, we believe that how they never explain how discussion can solve the discrimination for minority in the society. They just say in the long term those kind of discrimination will disappear. No mechanism at all in the first place. Third of all, we believe that discussion is made by majority capitalism. The voice of minority cannot be taken because the number of people are huge in the first place. Also, those kind of minority have to be labeled as the target of discrimination. That is something we want to prevent. Also, the minority people have to hear those kind of remarks even if some kind of discussion is going to occur. We believe that is so damaging. That's why we think that rather than discussion, we want to protect the minority people who suffer from the long term. We think in the comparative level our paradigm is failure. That's why we are very proud to propose.
Thank you for your remarks. Next, I'd like to call upon the member of positions. Please give your attention with the means here.
Thank you, speakers. So we just heard some really strong arguments as to why there is no reason for us to have hate speech and how it has absolutely no place in our society. Now I'd like to ask an important question before we go into the rest of my speech, which is, how do you find a fire if there's no smoke, no heat, and no smell? Because that's what it's like trying to stamp out hate if there is no expression of hate to go by. That's what I'm going to talk about today. What is the place of hate speech in our society? So, we've just heard a lot of arguments about how there is no place for it. I'm going to go through my rebuttals to that, which will actually build up to my argument. Then I'm going to talk about the characterization of what is hate speech and who are the people who are practicing hate speech. And then finally, I'm going to go into a little bit of analysis as to what we need to do about hate speech in our society, where it needs to stand in our society. So first, my rebuttals. We've heard some arguments that hate speech is not constructive and holds no value. The first thing I want to say about this is that when people are incited to say hateful things, there's a reason. Even if it's the stupidest thing you've ever heard, they've got to be pretty mad to go out and say those things. Why? Because the person who is speaking in such a way is putting themselves at risk by putting themselves out there. We live in a society, where the majority of people are either neutral or have a more open and accepting view of the world. And actually, people who are really full of hate to that extent that they want to use hate speech are not the majority. That's what I want to stress to you. They're not the majority. But if they come out and start spewing hate speech in public, because that's what we're talking about here, That means that either they live in a community where they think that they're isolated enough and surrounded and insulated by people that think the same as them to say those things and not have any consequences, or they're so upset and so fed up that they don't care if their neighbors and their coworkers and all their friends know how much hate is inside them. They don't care. They're that upset. So, why do we have those people coming out and saying these things? There must be a reason, right? First of all, I think we're assuming that everybody in the world has the ability to eloquently and succinctly and without getting heated and angry talk about their feelings. And they all have the level of education necessary to elocute what they want to say without using hate speech. Hate speech is really just a situation where people want to say something more, they have a really serious point they want to make, but they don't have all the tools to make it sometimes. So they turn to hate speech. So when we have people making hateful statements, using hate speech, a lot of times there's an underlying reason that I told you about. One thing that can happen is that the people who are full of hate and want to say hateful things actually have a really good reason to be upset, but instead of focusing on that, they go to the easiest target, such as, for example, in America, people giving hate speech to immigrants, saying, we want you out of our country, we hate you, you're this, you're that. The underlying situation there is actually, in a lot of cases, that these people are afraid of having their jobs taken away from people who are coming into the country. That's what's going on a lot of times. But instead of actually going to that point, they're so full and fed up that they go straight to, you're the other, we want you out. And that is where the hate speech comes from, okay? So, let me just put myself here. All right, so this is actually what we've been talking about as the role of hate speech in our society. The role of hate speech is not always just to hurt people. It's not always just to bring everybody down. Sometimes it brings vital attention to problem areas that need to be addressed in our society that we are missing. Go ahead.
Like in the case of the Nazis, for example, Jewish people, they had no real reason, but that Hitler made them a scapegoat, right? We believe there are many cases where people make other people's scapegoats without a reason, and then there is hate speech. What do you say to that?
I think that's absolutely true. And I also think that a problem that we've experienced is people believing that just because somebody's not saying something hateful doesn't mean they're becoming a scapegoat anyway. Hate is insidious. Hate grows in your heart, even if you don't have anything to say about it. And when you're suppressed, let me tell you, it's like putting a lid on a lot of hot water and keeping that steaming. So, in the case of the Nazis, let's just imagine for a second that there were bans against hate speech. Let's just imagine that those people had a lot of anger and they weren't able to let it out. Who's to say that that would stop them from doing those horrible things and not accelerate them into doing it sooner because they're ready to explode? We can't say that. And what we've heard from the government is that we have to be safe and we have to protect people from the harm that can be inflicted by hateful words. But let me tell you this. Right now, we have thousands of Americans in America bawling their eyes out and contemplating leaving the country and suicide because they just found out that a lot of their fellow Americans don't believe in the same values that they thought they believed in. They don't believe in the values that everybody is supposed to be treated equal. They don't believe that everybody deserves to be loved. They don't believe in welcoming people into their country. And why didn't they think this? Because they lived in a bubble. Why? Because they thought because they didn't have these hate speech all over the place, because they didn't see the signs of hate, because they didn't hear the signs of hate, that things were okay. But it wasn't. And this is what we're trying to talk about. Hate speech can be really important. I'm sorry. Please. Hate speech can be very important in bringing attention to areas that need attention, that needs to be fixed. So let's talk about hate speech in minorities. We've heard that minorities don't have the power to fight against hate speech, that they receive irrevocable damage that can't be taken away, and that's what we have to protect them from. What happens when they live their whole lives thinking that because they haven't heard anybody say anything hateful, that nobody hates them? And then they wake up one day and they go to the store and a bunch of people that they thought they're cool with don't even want to be in the same aisle with them. And they're actually being ostracized from society. People are telling them that they don't believe in them, they don't want them part of their society in really, really covert ways. What we're saying here is that hate speech, getting rid of hate speech and getting rid of hate are not the same thing. And if we are, as a government, want to say that we have the need and the justification to get rid of hate speech because it's really going to make a difference, I can't even say that that's true. I'm going to refute that. Because, in fact, in a situation where we have people who are subjected to situations that they're fed up with and they're completely tired of, but they feel that they can't outwardly express their emotions, what they're going to do is they're going to get subversive about it. They're going to go and do little subversive things. They're going to talk about people in secret. They're not going to be out and loud about it. They're not going to go out and talk about these things in public. But they're still going to hate. They're still going to be mad about these issues. And then what happens after that? After that, we see a huge backlash. And that's when people get knocked off of that pedestal where they thought they were safe, and they have more harm than they actually would have had if they were dealing with the hate face on from the get-go. Because it's a lot easier to deal with a little bit of hate, a little bit at a time, every day, than to one day just be bombarded with it in ways you didn't expect when you thought you were safe, okay? So my partner is going to go on and go deeper into this, but that's our analysis of hate and what its role is in hate speech in our society. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks. Next, I'd like to work on the government with the which page presented here.
As the government side, what we have to do is to protect citizens from unreasonable attack. And that is why we think that hate speech is not necessary in this world today. And that is why we stand on the government side. And I'm going to tell you firstly on the government side today. I'm going to tell you firstly one crash point, which side as the government should protect the dignity and the minorities' dignity, a human's dignity versus freedom of expression. We think that minorities' dignity are more that should be protected as the government side. And we think that, so before, let me shortly, and all my rebuttals integrate in my speech, let's start with this class point. The opposition side mentioned, from opening opposition side mentioned, all kinds of speech is okay. So if someone make hate speech, or they reveal the criticism from other people, so they have the chance to rectify that. So that is okay for those who make hate speech in the first place. So if we ban the hate speech, this kind of hatred will be accumulated in their minds, and this is really harmful to the body, and harmful to them, harmful to the society. But ladies and gentlemen, to opening opposition side, there are several responses here. Number one, of course, they revealed criticism in the first place, ladies and gentlemen, but that's not true with the Constitution is saying, because they treat them as not majority, but some people. If some people an unreasonable attacks to some people, someone in terms of ethnicity, in terms of racism, this can be they treat it as a scapegoat because they're minority, and so then this leads to, and this calls the other people's hatred, and this accumulate and gather other people's hatred. Why? Because if someone distracts something or somebody, because if someone have stress or trouble, they want to attribute trouble to others, and that is a human nature in the first place, and that is why they start insulting someone or somebody and attribute it to the trouble to others. So because of these natures, these kind of hate speech attributed to other people are likely to accumulate other people's intention, other people's hatred as well. And we think that in the first place, they are not likely to reveal any criticism. Of course, even if they reveal the criticism, some people and then they make the hate speech don't want to rectify them, because they think those who make hate speech think it's as true, right, in their mind. So they, because they hate them, that's why they express in that way. So that even though they are revealed in the criticism, they don't want to change their mind because they think that this is true, right? So even if they try to rectify that point, and this behavior is unjust. Why? Because in order to rectify their opinion, in order to change their mind, in this process, they discriminate someone, they undignify someone, and they sacrifice someone, and that is really important. As we see in the organ transplantation example, in order to save 5 people by organ transplantation, we don't allow to take out of the 1 people and kill 1 people and take out of the organs of them, organs of him or her, and they transplant to the 5 people, then survive. And we think the 5 people will survive, and we think that situation, as the government, don't allow them to do so because this is even if the majority's happiness, if the 1 people get harmed, we think as the government, in order to protect the individuals, in order to look at individuals, we don't think it is okay. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, the opening officer mentioned that if we ban, the hatred will be accumulated. Because ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, well, they didn't explain why this is harmful and the actual way this is harmful. We think that the hatred is okay, but we think that the outcome of the hatred outside of the let their hatred outside is not okay in the first place, right? Yeah. So that think of them, it's not okay. So that accumulate is no problem. Of course, if they commit crime to someone, this is actual harm to somebody. We think that they arrest them and punish them. Okay, so let's move on to what the closing governance I mentioned. No, thank you. The closing governance I mentioned that in the first place, this is not majority, and secondly, they mentioned that they bring the hatred spirit is really important because this bring attention of the people, and this leads to the problem solution after taking this plan. So they need to be fixed, or someone need to be fixed, harsh situation, and that is why they voice out as a way of the hate speech. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this contains a strange story. Why? Because we think that, of course, the voicing out is important, and changing a harsh situation is really important as well, but the way or behavior is really bad. Why? Because they devaluated it, because in this process, they evaluated some people, discriminated some people, right? So we think that this way is bad, even though we have another way, lots of another way. But for instance, if you feel you are taken away of job by immigrants, you can say to officers that, oh, I'm taken out of job by immigrants, so let me give jobs or like that. Or even though we have the right to say such kind of that, then what the opposition side trying to do is to express their feeling and express the feeling by immigrants is really bad. Immigrants is a devil or like that. We think that they degrade and they evaluate some people, and this even though the behavior in itself is not bad, it's not okay because that provides this provides certain objection or a certain devaluation of the human, and the way is bad because the way contains the degradation of other people, sacrificing other people, right? And this taken away of their dignity in the first place. And in the first place, so we think that another way to voicing out to solve this harsh situation. So let's look on to what the government side mentioned. The government side mentioned the majority, or not, even if they're not majority, some people, because of unreasonable attack, they get harmed. We think that in order to say that after taking this plan it's better, our crossing government extension is really important, because the crossing government extension is that, it's said that okay, of course that the hate speech is not disappear, so no people will get suffered by the undignified undignification. Add to that, how the situation will change, how in the long term, how the hatred feeling will disappear by taking this motion. And we think that this is really important, and not only in the short term, but also in the long term. We think that because of this benefit we have, we should ban to protect its citizens, and that is why we stand on the government side.
Thank you for your remarks. Finally, I'd like to call for the portion to be printed by your speech.
In order to conclude this debate, I'm going to talk about three things in this speech. Number one, that kind of all of individual harm can be compromised or not. Second of all, in terms of freedom of expression, we should put limitation on freedom of expression or not. Third of all, I'm going to explain, can we actually solve the practical problem, like the problem in immigration or those things suggested by my great partner's argument, can be solved without hate speech or not? Moving on to the first point. So first of all, somehow we have to consider at the last of this debate, some person or some community might suffer because of offensive remarks, because of hate speech. However, we have to remember the nature of democracy. There are so diverse opinions people exist in terms of racial or religion or whatever. That's why it's impossible to create the homogeneous or same opinions society without any harm to specific community, right? That's the nature of democracy. As long as democracy exists for making a prioritization, at the moment, for some community, it probably those specific policy or some remark can be harmful. That's why those harm can be neglected in the first place. More than that, in terms of media's incentive, ladies and gentlemen, like for example, like Holocaust does exist at the moment. Do you think that media have strong incentive to pick up those stupid remarks and have incentive to spread those information to public? The answer is of course not. Then what kind of actually hate speech actually media have incentive to pick up? At that moment, media are of course profit seeker. They want to gather a lot of viewers rate and it's going to be more advertisement will be consumed. At the moment, that kind of issues are always controversial issue, which is mainly discussed and commonly discussed by public, like the issue of immigrants, like my great partner already told you, like those sort of things, right? That's why those extremely stupid remarks without any logic, those are actually not important issue at all. Just saying, advocating that Holocaust doesn't exist, does not actually spread out to the extent that Jewish people will receive that information from TV or something. Not yet. Moving on to the second plus point, why freedom of expression should not be limited in this case. Because as long as democratic decision should be done by every single citizen, of course, and it should be important consensus. That's why in order to achieve this goal, every single citizen's expression is so important, right? For example, like and at the moment, the alternative method in order to express the opinion, probably we have to, as a countermeasure, participate in a public forum, probably, and explain our own argument logically, and participate in debating, and comparing the advantage or disadvantage, something like that. Do you really think everyone are such enough capable to catch up the current social topic? Of course no. And do you really think all they have a critical thinking to be able to compare those advantage and disadvantage? Of course not. This is not the answer. Those can be done only by intelligent enough and those majority who have really good enough educational access or who have enough assets to be able to invest their own fee to education. On that point, we consistently telling you how those minorities' voice actually are more likely to neglect it on this side of our house. Because, for example, in the case of the voice of Native American who are living below the poverty line, at the moment they are working as construction, a blue worker, how they can express opinion in their parlance as good quality, sophisticated explanation based on logic, right? It's impossible. That's why for those majority community, they're certainly going to have no power at all in order to express their power before that.
Okay, although there are a lot of ways to bring attention, such as lobbying or saying something to an officer in a moderate way, why do you use hate speech which stigmatizes vulnerable people?
If those minority have enough capability to lobby at the moment, investing a lot of money to politicians, they are no longer minority, they are no longer suffering right now. That minority they are suffering right now is that not that affluent enough to invest such a money, right? they totally mischaracterize an important character. At the moment, what we want to protect is that those minorities' voice who need to rely on such a violent way without intelligent way. Like I explained, this is the last resort to rely on in terms of expression process. No. That's how we have to secure this point. Moving on to the actual problem case. Can we actually solve a lot of practical issues or not? And human rights problem, of course, is important. However, we have to focus on the practical or international level issues like immigrants or like illegal immigrants from Mexico or those sort of things. Can we really solve this problem or not? On that side of the affirmative or banning hate speech, at the moment, how people are going to react is that people suddenly feel like it's kind of taboo to categorize the racial community or something like that. People are actually less likely to touch this kind of problem because of this taboo. That's why. But however, in actual problem, there are a lot of problems that we have to discuss, categorizing the racial community or a certain community, such as the migrant partner already explained. There are so many immigrants are actually going to Germany or France from Syria. At the moment, we have to discuss, is this community or country have really enough capability to accept so many immigrants or not? At the moment, some people advocate that's kind of distorting the social security, right? Some people are actually raped, or those persons who have actually experienced a real rape, they at the occasion, only way that they can express their anger is that hate speech, right? Based on their true emotion. Abolishing those last way is not the things to do as liberal democracy. That's why those problems are never ever discussed. That's terrible things. So we oppose.
Thank you for your remarks. Now we'll speak it over. Thank you for your. Okay, so firstly, maybe I think that we need to take care of the demonstration, so we need to hold the discussion in English. We are late, you guys, especially for the debaters. Since you are the English debater, I sincerely think you have enough ability to do so. Okay. So firstly, we need to share our kind of the markings. Okay, so from the Terry-san.
Hi, ちょっと待ってください。
Okay, no problem. So maybe it's okay. I hope it's further right now. Can I share the other person's experience?
今ですか？はい。
What's your ranking?
ランキングは OG、CG、CO、OO。
Okay, so yeah.
CG、CO、OG、OO です。
Okay, so Mira-san.
My brain wasn't working and I was hallucinating during this debate a lot. So I cannot give you four. Not only can I not give you four, I can't really discuss so well. But I thought that closing government, first place. Dareka, opening opposition fourth.
Okay, so now you're confusing about the third answer.
Yes.
So you clearly think like the first to the closing girl and the fourth to the opening off, right?
Yes.
Okay, I got it. And actually my planning is first to the closing girl, second to the opening girl, third to the closing off, and fourth to the opening off. I think the consensus in this debate, especially kind of the yes, maybe the opening off.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, go to the first, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Okay?
I think
Yeah,
so.
you guys agree?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And basically, the next problem is maybe the food should be the first. So I think the Terari-san, you have kind of the different idea of us.
Yeah.
So please justify your.
I think the opening government overrated closing government because the opening government did a really good job. Actually, they successfully proved how hate speech harmful to individual. Did the analysis on legislation and for the clear, I think. For the deep analysis can somehow enough to prove to ban, the necessity to ban. That's why I think the opening government, the expecting the case of closing government. Actually, the closing government did still did really good job. But I can catch the what kind point of exceeding the case of the opening government. Actually, opening government really provided after for the analysis.
So you mean the closing government phase to kind of differentiate opening government?
I think the contribution of the closing government is I don't know.
First explain.
I don't know. The clarify the case of after production and clarify give out the example and more
これ
understanding.
消したら大丈夫ですか？大丈夫じゃないですか？いや、前の。
いいですよ。
はい、どうも。
まだですか。でももうわかるから OK。
はい。
Sorry for
But I can't understand the why this actually from scenario of the unique necessary to prove the necessity of ban. I think the harm is already proved at the opening government. That's why already the burden of proof of ban is the activity at the opening government.
Okay, I confused. Maybe we go to what is justify very kind of the comparison with the opening government.
I think the opening government provided seriousness and harm about how hate speech would undignify minority people. But I think opening government proved this point, but they didn't explain why it should be banned. Well, it should be banned. They said like human dignity versus freedom of speech, but they didn't give us any criteria for judging these two matters. So I think they provided harm about connected with necessity, but they didn't explain why this policy why hate speech should be banned by the government. But the Croatian government first explained the benefit after taking this proposal, and in this point I think the Croatian government differentiated from opening government, and with uniquely solve this point. And moreover, Croatian government succeeded in engagement to the entire opposition case. For example, the government will explain criticism doesn't happen in the first place, and even if criticism happens, minority people doesn't have enough capacity to rebut these hate speech. So this point was very successful from the whole Croatian government. That's why I think these contribution came from Croatian government. That's why Croatian government overall the opening government.
Maybe I basically agree with you. So there's some.
I think, I agree, and furthermore, just in general, they had better engagement than the speaker of the second speaker of OG. I can't understand what you said because you spoke so quickly, and I'm mentally not.
Actually, the fruit, Minami-san?
Well, you don't have to repeat it, as long as he heard you.
Briefly, Minami-san would say, the basic line coming from the opening government side, first maybe they completed kind of the analysis and they cannot prove kind of the necessity to further explain the contribution of the order. That's why I think the opening government are really in the future to get the first line. I see. Okay.
So I'm assuming that you thought OG was first.
Yeah.
Okay, otherwise it doesn't make sense. And how about, well, did you change your vote or?
I thought another question for the criteria of engagement. I think the engagement, the perspective of engagement is somehow unfair for the open government.
But I'm not counting. I'm not saying Prime Minister didn't engage in that or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm saying compared to the second speaker's success in engagement versus closing,
Yeah.
or half of closing, or whatever.
I think that if you consider the role
Yeah.
fulfillment, it's also unfair for the closing government. You say like that, okay, open government they did a good job. There's no space to elaborate. Then it's kind of unfair, I think. So here, it's really difficult for us to English. Okay, so in my interpretation, I think to some extent open positions kind of try to explain like the hate speech and also passing or suggesting and by using kind of the majority will partner of the minority. But I think that such assumption is completely broken from the closing government side. So that the POI and direct engagement, and it must be the worst. And because such a kind of the open position, the engagement to the open government side, I've actually done in the legal positions. However, otherwise the parents are paid to do so. So I think it's kind of the difference between the open room and coding room because they just waited kind of the opportunity to engage us. So these are engagement campaigns.
That's fine. Okay, I can take it.
Of course, I think the open room is really good job by explaining the moment of this proposal. I think.
I didn't know what was irreversible when they said
I think so.
I think
That's coming.
maybe they meant it in two ways, but I didn't know any of them. So I'm not sure what they meant. I wish I could ask them.
Actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so for ask the closing.
So-
maybe the last thing
so
we need to discuss.
We
about-
literally agree with me exactly right now.
And maybe from the second to third, like the closing, the opening curve and the closing off. So maybe basically, okay, so please justify the kind of decision as for the closing off and the opening curve.
Okay, as I said, opening proposition explain like the harm in this. Harm? Opening comment.
Yeah, opening curve and
Opening
closing.
comment explain the seriousness and the harms about like hate speech to the minority people. And also like closing competition. This is the way to contextualize the hate, like when hate speech happens and why hate speech happens. So I think this is so. And as I said, opening government proved the necessity to take this motion, but also closing competition explain from contextualization why hate speech is necessary for, especially for why minority people who can't have enough ability to explain why they.
I understand you appreciate kind of the contribution from the closing off or the term was the kind of the contextualization.
できた後2分ぐらいでお願いします
Okay,
The way from closing opposition clearly extended this point by
okay, I see. So how about you?
ちょっと考えたいです。
Okay, I see. So in my opinion, I think of course the closing oppositions and mainly the opposition with really did a good job to elaborate entire opposition cases to kind of to oppose this motion. But the problem of the closing opposition, I think, is that maybe the oppositions will, and only the member of oppositions mainly talk about the kind of like situation we need and the kind of the backlash will be exploded after taking this proposal, suggesting, and I think that she didn't mention kind of frame of the democracy, but suddenly the opposition will try to elaborate under the frame of the democracy. I think it's kind of the unfair because as you know, we cannot take into account, we cannot consider new argumentation for the opposition.
you took it as a new matter.
Kind of the new method because the C didn't mention on these. I think to something here, C kind of the C. I don't know. It's a good. So I think, of course, they did a good job. Kind of as for the consistency, it's not really enough. I think. Or do you have any idea? It's difficult for you to discuss.
I'm not entirely sure why you're bringing up democracy because I didn't think they were bringing it up. But I think in general, closing up was good at contextualization, and they contextualized the feasibility, issues of arbitrariness, the issues of how public discourse is harmed. but I can't really say too much right now.
Okay.
My brain is turned off.
Okay, so here is how about you?
どうやろうな、オジshe closing opposition is success to the necessity for the particular minority,
Yeah.
but they still the fulfill the why the unique necessity is still can't prove it because actually the opposition will cannot differentiate with the other way, and how to give the method that like the hate speech is so effective for the minority. Actually, this argumentation is still not the fulfill なんか未完成な感じしたんですよね。
Yeah, I think
未
so.
完成って英語で何て言いますか？
Uncompleted.
Uncompleted. Actually, they success to the testify the character and necessity, but it's not uncompleted. I think uncompleted.
So it is completed.
Okay, so after sharing some opinion, so Minami-kun, what is your current concern? Okay, are you feeling kind of the, how can you say, just the complaint, or still you think, the closing will be the better than the opening? Or you can, what is your feeling now?
The change, like ranking between opening government and closing competition. So my worry about like closing competition, their extension, in their extension, even though they proved that like hate speech is vital attention for like minority people, but why it's so important to like making understanding.
Okay, so maybe you are kind of the convinced about the current terrorist as for the incomplete perfectness of kind of the curriculum. Okay, thank you. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so quickly we give the speakers 1 to speakers. Okay, so which is a better
speaker is
member?
closing government. Member or
Member? I think the member is better. Must be the 80 or 81?
81.
Okay, 81, right. How about the government view? 79? 78? Which? 78. Okay, go.
78?
You think 79?
79.
I think the better, higher is okay. 79, great. How about the opening girl? Which better? I think the prime minister did really good.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
He must be the 80, I think.
80. Yeah.
And I think as for the deputy prime minister and the 77.
78 or 7?
Was he 7?
7? Okay. 77.
77, I think. Okay, so how about the closing opposition? Which better?
Opposition with.
How do you feel?
I think the way is better.
Okay, with it better. I
そうだけど。
think the mountain is really small, so we can do the 79, 78. Is possible?
Yeah.
Wait, is that possible?
79.
No.
No.
I don't think so.
78 and
Lower.
77.
7. Very good.
これなんて言いますか ?155?
That's probably more accurate anyway.
157なんだから57だから78使ったら79までだったら
そうですね。
I think that's the proportion with kind of 79.
Yeah. 79.
Yeah. Okay, great. And the last thing for the unfortunately opening up
Leader of opposition was
was.
maybe the worst.
Okay, I think that, yeah, I agree with the deputy leader position. The lady.
Sorry.
78 for the leader of the position, 76 and the 78 for the deputy leader position.
76.
And the 78.
78?
I think it's possible for us. But sorry. I think that their difference is very big, so.
Yeah, I think the margin is rather small.
How much? 2 or 3?
77.
77?
これ、この分じゃない
Yeah, okay, I agree with you.
Whoa,
Great.
that's very high.
Great. So which digit will kind of up to high? If we have 74 or 75?
75?
75, yes.
I had a feeling you wouldn't go to 4, but I'll take 5.
So the 1 5. Okay, thank you.